This one was research that talked about cooperatives and how they can move people toward reconciliation after violent conflict. So the main questions were, how might a cooperative help achieve reconciliation, especially following violent conflict? And how does a cooperative impact the people and groups involved? And I will read just a small excerpt from the actual article about what a cooperative is in this context. Which according to the International Cooperative Alliance, a cooperative is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. And so they have 10 values that are self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity, honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. So for this study, the author, he took a group of people from 2 different cooperatives in Rwanda. He looked at the Peace Basket Cooperative, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce that term, but a coffee cooperative of that group. So total, they had 150 from the coffee one and 38 from the Peace Basket Initiative. And then he kind of interviewed them on 2 sides, but to note that genocide survivors and genocide perpetrators doesn't necessarily have to be one ethnicity or the other. So, but it's generally coming from these 2 sides. He had a bit of a mix there. And then he focused interview sessions with them, and he talked to them about their perspectives. What did they feel before they joined the cooperatives? How did the cooperatives maybe change their thoughts and feelings towards the other group? And why they joined the cooperative in the first place. So the results found that most of the members joined the cooperatives initially for the purpose, as I read, it was to meet their common economic needs. So a lot of them needed money. They needed some way to support their families. And so, so that was their primary focus for joining. It was not focused on reconciliation at all. A lot of them admitted that they still had a lot of reservations, a lot of anger and hate towards the people on the other side when they initially started. There's a lot of mistrust between the 2 groups as well, but it was that they still needed each other and needed to rely on each other to meet their other needs. As they worked alongside each other, things, happened naturally in a way that unfolded feelings and conversations that did lead a lot of them to reconcile. So they touched on how they, often all felt in different ways a sense of loneliness or different traumas and pains that were caused by the genocide. A lot of the perpetrators had displayed, their feelings of guilt. They would, eventually, so it happened over years, but eventually they get these conversations where they apologized and they sought reconciliation. And the, many of the survivors offered forgiveness for that, to the point that they often reported that they would come to each other's homes. They would, share stories with each other, tell jokes, etc. They moved into a point of reconciliation, but also a relationship after the fact. So one of the most important takeaways is that cooperatives are organized and led by 2 or more groups and are founded on the basis of equality and working toward a shared goal. And those 2 factors are very critical to move things in a positive direction, which in this case resulted in reconciliation, forgiveness, and acknowledgement of the wrongdoings from those involved. So I thought this study was particularly fascinating with the idea that cooperatives are, there is no third party who leads them. It is led by the 2 groups involved only. So I think that that's really fascinating, that this all happened on their own accord and without any other type of intervention.
Yeah, this is great. I love this.
Natalie, did the study talk at all about the Gacaca courts?
I think it did mention it very briefly.
Yeah, that's like my, what we talk a lot about, circle processes and way of counsel now and restorative justice. But it was, it's an indigenous practice, but it really started to become a little bit more mainstream in global society after the Rwandan genocide in the 90s. And it was community courts, by the survivors and the perpetrators, kind of very similar to this. It just kind of aligns with it. That's why I'm thinking, they're clearly talking about what worked so well for this particular nation, right? Was not having a third party coming in, but actually having that reconciliation amongst the, those that identified as Rwandan, in that nation.
Yeah, shared identity, shared humanity, common goals, positive interactions, very, very aligned with the intergroup contact theory research.
Yeah, definitely. And naturally, of course, he mentions that as a part of the overarching conversation there. But it is, I think this is one of the things that I'm astounded, no matter how many times I read about it, just how, despite such a traumatic event, how something like this could still unfold in this way. And especially without third party intervention, like I said before, I think that's just really fascinating that this came out of that. So I think another key really is about having willing participants who can acknowledge where they may have been wrong and reaching that point of reconciliation.
There's like a level of motivation here. It's like it starts with this high, like sort of individual needs for something, or they get into the cooperative and because they need something for themselves without any real initiative to like, I want to reconcile in some way. And this level of interdependence that it's required to actually make the cooperative work and get those benefits ends up being beneficial, like to the relationship. And so I'm trying to think like in a workplace where, we have some people that don't get along. We like, okay, let's get them all on like a team and like get them to share a goal and work towards something. It won't work unless they feel like A, they really need the goal to happen, and B, there's a high level of interdependence among people. So like, I need this to happen and I need to work with this person to get it done. And a lot of times like we find like they're just not very motivated because they think like, I don't really need this person to get my job done, or I don't need this person to reach my goal. So like I think if there's some practice of like helping people find the shared goals where they really need the goal and they really need to be depending on each other to get there, that's probably a helpful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Just increasing everyone's understanding and awareness that they are one part of a collective whole, like the organization, the company at large. And even something as minuscule as an interpersonal conflict between two people has the ability to affect.
It's so hard. A lot of times they don't recognize that they're part of this team. They're just like, they're kind of siloed, or they're just like, I don't need to work with that person to do my job and like that. And they're not organizationally minded, where it's like, no, we all kind of need to work together so the company can do well. And if the company does well, I do well. It's like there's some disconnect there. I think it'd be very helpful if we can make sure like we have some practice that, just kind of like, I don't know, just somehow pragmatically like helps people identify as like, wait a minute, I'm part of the team and the team needs to do well so that I can do well. There's some self-interest there that needs to be like capitalized on,
Yeah.
Cybernetics, right? We're all like mechanics we're all part of the whole, and like without one part of us, the whole is not going to run. The machine's not going to run the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, we're all part of the hive in some way.
So this also, just the study makes me think of the level of healing that was needed, and like the extraneous trauma that actually was endured by these people that maybe made them more apt to engaging in processes like this, and comparing that to the workplace. Like sometimes we don't have that level of trauma or healing that is needed, so it might be more difficult for employees to
Well, but on the other side, if you have that level of trauma, I mean, that's like hatred that you'd have to get past, like serious hatred. Like imagine if someone killed a family member of yours, like that's intense. How do you get past that, you know?
Absolutely, but I still think that that might be part of what is actually motivating people to engage, even though I know it sounds like we would think the opposite, like, oh, that's a lot of hatred to reconcile it, to get over, but I don't know, I guess I would be more drawn the other way, like where it's, then you would, if you really want to heal, you can't heal without forgiveness, right? Without engaging in a process with said perpetrator.
It's almost like the hatred you're holding on to is so painful that it's motivating you to want to heal more than if it were kind of more of a subtle pain, you know? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Like it's so uncomfortable to have this much trauma, hate, etc. in you, like you'd be more motivated to heal it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like Buddha said, holding on to anger is like holding on to hot coals. You're the one getting burned.
Yeah.